welcome to another episode of The Shift with Elena Agar. In this conversation, I speak with Cheryl Fischer. She's a mindset coach. She spent many years in different organizations, institutions, really taking on this educator role, whether when she was in teaching high school or then working with corporations. And she has taken all those learnings and all those experiences and decided to launch her own kind of consultancy and coaching business where she helps people not only live well, but also trains them on mindset training, like how to just think differently, how to check yourself when you're talking to yourself negatively, and just some of the health things that you can do on a daily basis to really improve your overall wellness. She also has a podcast that's called OMG Teach Me. And I think you'll really enjoy it because she really kind of offers a lot of learnings and just really practical things that anybody can benefit from. So enjoy the conversation. Cheryl, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you today. To kick us off, when we first met like online and we talked a little bit about your background, I found it very fascinating. So you come from an educational background. So talk to me a little bit about that. Give me a little snapshot of your career story before we dive in.
Yes, I've made a lot of career changes along the way, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so the path that kind of started me towards where I am now was education. I came out of the corporate world to become a teacher in high school. And I had been doing that for a number of years when I realized that maybe I wouldn't want to do it forever. And maybe I would want to have options, but I didn't really know anything about where that would take me. So I started an online business on the side, a network marketing business. And that ended up being the catalyst for me to realize that I really did enjoy digging into mindset and learning more about things that just weren't taught to me in school when I studied business or economics. And that led me to leaving teaching, going into a corporate training type of job, and then becoming a mindset coach and just kind of diving deeper into that. So it was a windy path for sure.
Yeah. And so as a mindset coach, I know you're really big on like, healthy habits that people can do and like mindset kind of work. So what are some things that we often take for granted that are very simple that all of us can do to help us lead just a better quality life?
You know what? One of the biggest things is learning how to recognize how we're feeling at any particular moment. And this could be at work, at home, anytime. If we could learn how to name the feelings that are happening, then we can try to figure out where is that coming from and what is causing it. And is it something that I'm just getting myself worked up about and it's not really real? Or is it something that maybe I need to take action about? And it was true for me, but I find that it's true for a lot of people that I just don't think we're used to trying to recognize how we're feeling. And it's powerful.
Well, I think it's just so difficult for a lot of people. It's uncomfortable.
Yes. Yes. Well, especially if you're in a professional environment or something like that, we're not used to talking about feelings. Not that you need to talk about it, but it just feels like a different focus. But there's just things we can identify that something's been running around in our head all day, and maybe we're not totally conscious of it, but we're angry about something, or we're upset about something, or we're worried about something that hasn't even happened. And that creates feelings and emotions that if we can identify them, sometimes they kind of dissipate and we can go about our actions in a lot different way.
You know what I think is scary about that for many people is that a lot of times when you start digging there, you start to uncover a lot of things, and depending on where you are in your life or who you're with or how old you are and how long you've been in this certain mindset, it's like a Pandora's box that a lot of people, at least in my experience, don't want to open, and or they're not ready to open. I wasn't ready to open my Pandora box for the longest time. So I think it takes a lot to get there.
That's a good point. And we have to be kind to ourselves about that. And that's also not something that we're all very good at typically.
No, yeah.
So, yes, I hear what you're saying. If we maybe feel like we're going to identify something that we really should change or that we're going to be frustrated about, maybe we'd rather sweep it under the rug. But sometimes when you can figure it out, it gets better. Just right away, just being aware, it gets better.
Mm. What have you noticed between, like, is there anything that comes to mind between, when you were teaching younger generations, like high school students, to then working with corporates and people now? Like, what are some fundamental things that each maybe generation can learn from each other?
Great question. That's a great question. I used to joke before I went into teaching that the people I was working with in the corporate environment at that time acted like teenagers, so I may as well go work with teenagers. But I was joking.
Yeah.
Let me think about that. What could we learn from high school students? They really, not to stay on the same theme too much, but they
Yeah.
really kind of live full out.
Mm.
They have, interpersonal issues where they might be shy or something like that, but they feel everything and they
Mm.
care a lot. They don't necessarily show it, but like
Right.
there's big heart in a lot of what they do. And all they need a lot of times from the adults in their lives, I think, is just us recognizing that. And
Mm.
maybe that's true of adults too. Maybe we kind of hide some of our personality more than teenagers do. Maybe that's a lesson that we could allow a little bit more of our real selves to show in everyday life,
Mm.
appropriately, obviously,
Right, right.
because they really do that.
Yeah.
And it's a healthy thing.
Mm. It's a really good point, actually, because when you're young, you almost, like, you're curious, you're excited, right? And then as you go into college and they want you to take this specific pathway, and then it's like, well, I'm kind of stuck there now because I've spent 2-3 years studying this, and I want to graduate, and I don't want to keep taking loans. So you're kind of stuck in this thing, and then you graduate and you're like, well, I kind of did this and I paid a lot of money, and if I can get a job on it, let me just go and do that. Although like 50% don't, but a big portion of students do end up going, and then you are in that job, and it's almost like the world, as sad as it may sound, is just like, when you, like, what is it, like whack-a-mole? And
Yes.
it just like whack-a-moles you down, as you grow,
Yes.
so that by the time we get to adulthood, we're like, we don't even know how to feel anymore because we have suppressed everything that we wanted for the sake
Yes.
of expectations of others, society, relationships, family,
Yeah.
bosses, teachers, professors, and so on. And I think that's, so that when you're talking about that point, I was like, that's probably why, you know?
I think you've got it. I think you've really got it. And we compare ourselves to other people, and then we try to fit into maybe a mold that we think we need to fit into, particularly in a job. Typically, we want to be professional, and whatever professional means, we might kind of create this persona that is the professional us. And there's not anything wrong with that, except that I think we can always let some of our personality out, and it's healthier to do that.
Yeah.
And we'll probably be happier, and maybe we'll interact with people better. So, yeah, I think you're right that we kind of get pounded into a mold after a
Mhm.
while if we let that happen.
Well, you know what? Honestly, like Gen Zs these days, they just show up as they want to. Like that's what it feels like. I think it stopped at the millennial generation, which is myself. I'm the elderly millennial, but I feel like it stopped with us. Like we were still mindful. Gen Zs are like, no, 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 no. I'm not gonna work here unless I can do X, Y, and Z, and you're gonna pay me this much, and I'm gonna work 3 days a week. And at least that's, not everybody. Obviously, I'm picking on Gen Zs, and I know I'm on this like pick on Gen Z's mode these days, but because it's hard for me to emphasize with them. It's really hard. And sometimes they show up a little bit too much as themselves, and it's like the
Yeah.
world is still professional. There's still
Yeah.
a line, whether you like it or not. Like the professional world just doesn't operate at a Gen Z level. Like it's just,
Right.
you know what I mean? Yeah, like maybe when all of us retire, all the millennials out of the workforce, maybe Gen Zs can run the show and after the baby boomers, the Gen X and Gen Zs, but I mean, millennials, but we're still kind of running the show. And you need to also meet us halfway. Like, okay, we'll give you 4 days a week, but show up the 4 days
Right.
working. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, it's interesting you say that, because I'm actually Gen X, believe it or not. And I'm not elderly. I'm still good. But if we talk about lessons coming back the other way, then there's a lesson right there from Gen X and from the millennials to younger people, is that, okay, great, live with heart and show your personality, but you got to do the work. Like, I feel like Gen X, we're the generation that was pre-internet, and my, upbringing was very different because of that. And you just kind of make it happen and figure it out. And so that's probably a lesson that could go back the other way.
Yeah. It's a very good point. But it's very interesting dynamics. Let's put it that way. That happens. So teaching seems to be this common thread in your career, and just like really kind of educating in whatever role that you're in. So how do you see teaching as a tool even for your own personal and professional growth, right? Like, because, they say, if you want to learn something, I forgot the actual steps, but it's like, if you want to learn something, like read about it. If you want to be an expert about it, like an expert on something, teach it, and so on, right? Like, so how has that been beneficial to your own growth, and how can others incorporate it in their growth?
Ooh, that second part of the question is challenging. Okay, so for me, I kind of realized that I have a talent for breaking things into pieces that people can grasp. And so I've been just kind of trying to figure out, well, how can I use that in a way that is meaningful? Because I could teach a subject and have reluctant students in high school, or maybe I could go out and teach something that can really, really change people's lives, which is where I'm headed now. But I just always wanted to make a difference and realize that maybe this was the way I could do it. And so you're right that it's always been a theme for sure.
Yeah.
And then I appreciate that you said that if we really want to become an expert in something, teach it, because I think that it's misunderstood a little bit with teaching, that you'll hear the sort of opposite of that saying, where people say, if you can't do, teach. And I hate to have even said that out loud, because I want that saying to go away. It's not true. It's really the opposite. If you want to teach something, you got to really, 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 really know it and care about the people that are listening to you and really want to serve them. And so maybe that's a little bit the lesson for other people, is that maybe you're not the personality to teach or explain. Maybe that's not your comfort zone, but you could still help or mentor. Right. And that would almost be the same type of thing.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't have to be formal teaching or facilitation or something like that. And yeah, and I agree with that statement you made, because it's a lot of especially like after, I feel like after 2020, like everybody became a coach and a trainer and I don't know what. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, but like, and especially like young people, like I see like people that are like talking like, career coaching, but they're like 22. I'm like, you haven't even had a career. Like, yeah, okay, maybe you've had some interviews, but like, it's just mind blowing. I'm like, what qualifies you as a career coach at 22? What career have you had? What challenges have you dealt with in politics and the corporate one? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, so I'm not, so part of it is like, yes, you need to have some fundamental like knowledge and experience in a particular area to teach. But when you do teach or mentor, you learn so much more because it forces you to go back and study that topic, to prepare, to research it again and again. And also when you're learning, if you're facilitating, when you're learning with the crowd, the questions they ask is also learning opportunities for you. So it's quite interesting. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that about questions, because I think that's one of the biggest parts of teaching or mentoring, where both sides are learning. Because people ask questions that the mentor or the teacher maybe never thought of. We have to figure it out. We might figure it out together. Yeah.
So how do you balance all this? You wear many hats, right? Being a mom, a wife, an educator, a coach. and a network marketing professional. How do you balance all of that?
Well, I am at the point in life where I'm an empty nester. So I will not claim that my kids are home and I'm running around with them all the time. I do have a little bit more time than I used to. So that helps. But I also just really like a challenge and I like to be busy. And so I try to make sure that whatever it is I'm doing, I actually want to do. And I think maybe sometimes that's a trap that we get stuck in, is that we feel like we have to continue doing something. And I mean, maybe you need to continue doing something because you need the income, but even just thinking about other possibilities is what started me down the path to finding things that I love so much more than what I was doing before. Just allowing in your mind the idea that maybe there's something else out there, that maybe it could fit in. Because we do have more time than we think we do. And if you like it and you enjoy it, like I have a podcast now, I love it. I'm going to make time for that. Are there other things that maybe I might not do as much? Probably. But if it's something that we enjoy, if we can kind of be open to finding those things, then we're going to make time.
Yeah. And you know, it's a theme that's been occurring to me lately a lot. And I don't know if I'm just more paying attention to it, but what I want to do, and freeing up myself a little bit to just do nothing sometimes as well. And to have that, I people who know me and my listeners, they know me. I'm like 7 days at work, 7 days I work. You know, for years, I've done that. You know, like I'm always doing something, maybe not full days on Saturday and Sunday, but I'm always working on a weekend in some capacity because I wear many different hats in my life, and I'm very excited about things, and I want to, and I have kind of certain things I want to achieve in life.
Right.
But I've realized it became counterproductive to me, and I got so caught up in doing things. I'm like, do I really want to do this? Do I need to do this? And starting to clarify it. And now and so I'm having this conversation with you, and this comes up, and I have personal training clients that I train, and I was talking to one of my clients this morning, in fact, and I was like, how was the weekend? You know, I haven't seen him since last week. And he was like, I just worked, you know, and I'm just like, you know, I'm like, we spend so much more time, and you know, not like he likes his job by any stretch of imagination, but it's just, it's again, I'm so sensitive to it these days, because I'm like, so many people, we have become so accustomed to working all the time. You know what I mean? Like can't, like, I mean, listen, do your job for sure. Like I think more people need to just do their job. Like, let's be real.
You have to do that.
Yeah, you have to do that. Like you gotta, you know, get your things done, be responsible. But we are doing a lot of things we don't want to do. Working on weekends, we obviously probably don't want to work on weekends, especially when we're working for somebody else, right? If you work for yourself, it's a little bit of a different challenge, right? But it's a tough one, you know, and it requires us to stop and pause. And I think that's hard for people. What have you found from maybe some conversations?
You know, I would say two things to that. Number one, I fully agree that we need rest time. And I do talk a lot about healthy living related to mindset. And you mentioned that at the beginning, and our brains need downtime. Our bodies need downtime. It's a stress hormone thing, really. If cortisol is flowing all the time because we're always in the sympathetic nervous system and always ready to fight, not literally, then that's bad for our health. So we need that downtime, as you're saying, but it could be an hour or a half day, or it doesn't have to be all day. And the second thing that came up for me as you were saying that is, I think maybe we could learn how to focus on things that really do make a difference in whatever we're doing. And maybe sometimes we spend a lot of time on the planning and the prepping, or the busy work, or the email right when it comes in, or, you know, we could become more efficient. And I think that's probably how I do what I do, because I do rest and I do turn everything off, because that's important. But I also am really fast when I work. And maybe sometimes it's not the best way to go, but a lot of times we can get rid of some wasted time. I think if we just sort of think about how to do things efficiently and what part of the job is the part I need to do now, because that's the part that really makes a difference.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's definitely a tough one for people to, like, it's funny how, Cheryl, how the basic things that we neglect are the ones that we actually need to do. And they are, let me rephrase, they are the ones within our control. So for example, right, like for example, people always look for magic formulas, like, well, when I get that promotion, or when I change my job, or da da da, and then it's like, well, no, you just need to figure out what you want to do. You need to spend some time auditing how you spend your time, right? Answering questions like self-awareness, emotional intelligence, like understanding yourself. But that's the hardest. It's easy because it's like, it's accessible. You can do it anytime, really. Like, you can stop and just start doing it. But it's the hardest thing.
Yes. Well, and I think, again, we're so hard on ourselves. So one great thing that people can do if they're not quite satisfied with what they're doing now, they'd like to do something else. A great way to start figuring that out is to just kind of turn all the noise off, sit down and daydream about it. And just like imagine that you have this job that you would love to have, or this life that you would love to have, and just let yourself literally daydream about it and feel good about it. And our brains get a little more creative when we do that, and we think of ideas. But we have to be careful, because sometimes we end up saying, oh, well, wouldn't it be nice if I had that? And then it becomes a very negative thing. Yeah. But if you let it be a positive thing, then sometimes you really do. You get inspiration and ideas that might be really good.
And how does health and wellness play into all of that?
Well, I'm trying to think how to answer that. It's all connected. It's all connected. I think that there's so much more of a connection between the gut and the brain than we ever thought before. Not I think, there is. And so what we eat, what we take into our body, how much we move our body, whether it's just walking around the block or it's much more intense than that, that affects the health of our digestive system, our gut. But the gut then sends out nutrients, basically, I'm not using exactly the right terms, but I'm trying to keep a simple picture, to everywhere in our body. And it controls hormones in our body, which affect things like chronic illnesses and blood pressure. And I mean, just all sorts of health issues that will then affect the quality of our life. Our hormone levels affect how well we think, how well we sleep. How well we sleep affects how well we think. It's all interrelated.
Yeah. And I'm completely on that train for sure. But it's just, again, it's amazing how it is the simple, like, you don't need a gym membership, and go for a walk. And again, we look for these, like anxiety, loneliness, stress are highest they've ever been, especially for young people. And yet we don't focus on that as a society. We don't, encourage that as much. With social media, there's so much negativity out there, and there's so many misconceptions. It's all about body positivity. Like, yeah, sure, be body positive. Like, you know what I mean? Don't be, you know what I mean? Be supportive.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, don't talk crap about people, and like be mindful and all that. But at the same time, like, there is science behind, if you're obese or etc., like the gut, the things you eat, the composition of your body impacts how you think, right? As you said, how you operate as a human, and so on. So it's like, it's silly. It's silly to think that, to be offended if, do you know what I'm saying? If that, that topic offends you, like, you have to check yourself, because it's like, it's not meant to be offensive. It's meant to encourage you actually to live a better life.
Yes. And body positivity is an interesting thing, because I agree with everything you said. Picking on people for how they look is always wrong. That's always the wrong thing to do. And to ourselves as well. We're all going to look different, even when we're at our healthiest. So I agree certainly with that part, but then it sort of goes sometimes too far. and becomes, well, it doesn't matter what I eat and it doesn't matter what I do because I'm just going to be me. And I would say, I want you to be the best you. And that means there's probably healthy choices that you need to make. And it can be overwhelming. So one of my episodes was talking with a naturopathic doctor about gut health. And she said, just start eating more vegetables. Like, just start. You don't have to revamp everything. You don't have to freak out because you are totally overwhelmed. Just one or two things, walk around the block, eat more vegetables. And it really does affect us in so many ways.
Yeah, and it's very individualized, right? Like for some people, like veggies is the way to go. For others, it could be a carnivore diet, and it could be I think it's also like knowing your body is essential,
Yes.
right? And everything in moderation. Like you don't need to be super extreme. Like you don't need to be a power lifter or a CrossFit unless that's your thing. You know what I mean? But we're just talking about basic healthy lifestyle, just basics. Moving, eating a little bit more green vegetables or whatever floats your boat, whatever makes you feel good, whatever your body reacts to, fruits, whatever. And yeah, movement's probably one of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
We have this whole thing of loneliness. I was actually reading a report or listening to a report the other day, and they were saying how especially among, I forget the age group now, but among young people, and especially men, loneliness is a huge thing. Especially like a lot of Gen Zs, generationally, Gen Zs males are the loneliest as of today.
Wow.
Which is crazy. And I don't remember the full report of what was the explanation, but it was from a valid source. And they were just saying that because again, we grew up with they especially graduated with during a pandemic, or so that main part of their adult life when you're in university or about to graduate and so on, or starting on university, was completely disrupted, and you weren't able to create those social circles. And then a lot of them are just playing video games and having friends online, but it's
not the same.
No, and yeah, so it's pretty scary.
And as humans, we're meant to connect. We're meant to connect with each other. And I hear what you're saying. I mean, there are good things to social media. Unfortunately, there are a lot of sort of dangerous extremes that could be caused by social media too. And you're right about the pandemic. I mean, there's an age group that maybe doesn't know how to interact as well in person as they do online. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. But moving on to a cool thing that you started, which is OMG Teach Me podcast. Tell me more.
Oh, I'm in love with it. And obviously you're a podcaster. You know how much fun it is to do it.
Yes.
So I have for a long time tried to figure out, how did I want to share with other people some of the things that I learned as I went through my journey of becoming an entrepreneur, becoming a mindset coach, learning just all these things that I had no idea about ever. Even the wellness, I just had no clue. So how do I share that with other people? And I thought of maybe being a speaker, but I wasn't sure about all the travel. And I just was kind of pondering. This is why I say, sometimes when we just kind of let it run in our minds, we kind of ponder. One day I just kind of smacked myself in the head and said, I listen to podcasts all the time. Why couldn't I do that? Why couldn't I teach that way? And so the name OMG Teach Me came from, people always are laughing at me because I say, oh my goodness, all the time. I like all the time, as if I'm a grandma. Oh my goodness. And, and then teach me because it's about just all these powerful things that change our lives that we didn't learn in school.
Yeah, that's exciting. So what are some things you're excited about for the next 6 to 12 months in this, in your entrepreneurship journey and your podcasting?
So yes, my podcast is now 7 months old. And so that will hit a year, and that will be really exciting. That feels like a big momentous occasion at that point. And gosh, what else is coming up? I am expanding some of the mindset offerings. So coming up in the next few months will be a coaching program that people can join. I'm kind of in development right now, so that's exciting too.
Yeah, that's awesome. And where can people find the podcast and just everything that you are doing and going to be doing?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook as OMG Teach Me podcast. And it's on all the major apps, Apple, Spotify, everywhere. So yes, absolutely listen. Let's connect. I'm mostly on Instagram, I would say, but everywhere. So yeah, I would love to hear feedback too.
Sounds good. I'll make sure to share that in the show notes as well. And one last question I have for you. What is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
So I'm going to kind of bring it back to a little bit of what we talked about at the beginning. I wish that people, including me, would always get in the habit of asking ourselves, what am I talking to myself about in a loop in my head all day? Just stop and recognize, because there's always thoughts in there. And sometimes they're really mean and they're really not true. And if we can at least recognize that, we can start to figure out how to flip it. And that's a big energetic shift.
That's a good one. What are you saying to yourself, basically?
Mm-hmm.
What is that loop? Now I'm like thinking, you see me, I'm like, what is that loop for me? I started doing it already. I need to stop. Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Well, thank you so much, Cheryl. I look forward to continuing to watch your journey.
Thank you.
Especially in the podcasting world. So OMG Teach Me. So I'm definitely going to tune in and listen in on some of the episodes. And hopefully have you back in the future, maybe after 1 year anniversary of the podcast, and you can share with us lessons learned and biggest takeaways.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been fun.